Hey guys, it's the WalterFootball.com After Dark Show for November 29, 2024. We're going to be looking at the Thursday thoughts for the Week 13 NFL picks against the spread for this 2024 NFL season. Before we intro our co-hosts, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Hope you had a great holiday and a great day of betting football and watching football and hanging out with family. But yeah, speaking of the merch store, I am once again wearing my winter apparel here, the Walter Football shirt. We have a bunch of other t-shirts here, all 25% off right now. I guess that's the Black Friday sale. It's been 25% off for like a week or two. I don't know how long this sale is going to last. I have no control over what percentage off there is. I always get a set amount going my way, but they're in charge of it. So right now it's 25% off. So if you want to help the show, you can buy one of these shirts, or you can go to Amazon, buy some of my books. The latest one is Jerks to the College Years, where I made fun of people I saw at Penn State for six years. I was there as an undergrad for 6 years and had a lot of fun and a lot of writing material. And then how the 2020 MVP was stolen. It's how Brett Favre tried to sabotage Aaron Rodgers 4 years ago when Rodgers was winning the MVP. And then please consider super chats, super stickers. We've had some great ones this week and last week. John Sanders, Dro Fast Show, Can't Make an Eagle, Jesse Cintron, Slew. Like, you guys have been so awesome with your contributions. So any further help there would be great, because these YouTube ads really pay nothing. Like, can't say that enough. It's a joke how little they pay us here. So so we were joined once again on Thursday by Andy Isco. Andy, how are you? And happy Thanksgiving.
And a happy Thanksgiving to you, Walt, and of course all the listeners and viewers. A very good Thanksgiving. I was telling you before the show, I started my day with a slice of apple pie and ended it with a slice of pumpkin cheesecake.
Nice.
And there was some turkey and cranberry and stuffing and potatoes and yams and all that sort of stuff in between. And it was an interesting day of football. It was kind of like a nice sandwich. We had a nice sandwich of a good first game, a good third game, and then we had the Giants and Cowboys in the middle.
Yeah, that was a frustrating one with all the Giants turnovers leading to Dallas touchdowns.
It was a frustrating game for football fans to have to watch on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, Giants fans though, you have to think that they're at least a little bit happy, because I think they're going to have a good chance to secure the number one pick. They had to watch this game, but they have to know that their team is trying its best to tank. So it was, I would say, a mistake to have the Giants on my card. And the Lions, we can talk about them as well. That was frustrating, but
by the way, excuse me, for the Giants, you could tell in that game that Dallas is still playing.
Yeah,
the Giants are not. The Giants checked out a while ago. Dallas is still playing, which is interesting because, well, with the win now and the win last week, Dallas is really no longer in the hunt for the number one draft choice, which they could have certainly been had they lost today. But it might very well come down. In fact, there's a lot of interest in New York, because the schedule for next year, that 17th game, they play an interconference foe in the division that finished in the same place that you finished in your division. Mm-hmm. So if the AFC East and the NFC East play the 17th game against each other next year, so there's a real good chance. I was going to say we would be treated to, but I think I'll say that the fans would be subject to a game between the Giants and the Jets. So they're already thinking 2026 draft choice, the loser of that game.
Yeah, I always theorized that the Giants were not going to tank for the first pick and try to get Arch Manning in the 2026 NFL draft. But the way they're going now, I think that they're targeting Shedeur Sanders. So, and Arch Manning may not even declare for 2026. Everyone's yelling at me when I post the link to my 2026 NFL mock draft. I have people yelling at me on Twitter saying, "There's no way he's going to come out for 2026. He's going to stay until 2027." Like, guys, calm down. So,
well, the thing is, he knows he's going to get a lot of money, and his family has done very well with Father Archie and the uncles. Peyton and Eli. So if he might be one of those rare athletes who actually values getting a college education and enjoying the college experience that non-athletes get to, for the most part, enjoy. So, if he is that type of person, and I could certainly understand if he might say, you know what, let me go at least another year, maybe go to my senior year, because, I'm sure that a lot of these top prospects have nice Lloyd's of London insurance policies in case they have career-ending or career-delaying injuries. So we don't know what a lot of the guys are thinking, but that might be a reason why Arch does not graduate. And also, he might very well benefit from a full year as the starter. And his stock is pretty high right now, but he could almost elevate it by having a good year, because Texas is expected to be a good team once again next year with him as the presumed starter.
Yeah, and if he spends enough time in school, he can write a book about seeing weird people on campus too. So
yeah,
that's a bonus. The frustrating game of the day though was the Lions game, where they were up 16-0. It could have been 23-0 or 19-0 or whatever. Jahmyr Gibbs didn't fumble inside the 5-yard line, and as someone who had Jahmyr Gibbs in every single DraftKings lineup, I was very frustrated by that. And then also Jahmyr Gibbs just disappeared in the second half. I have no idea where he went.
I think he I think had sort of a little injury, like a shoulder or something in the first half, I thought.
Did he? I don't know if I missed that.
I may have thought it was Gibbs. I don't think it was Montgomery. I think it was Gibbs who seemed shaken up on one of those plays.
Okay, I must have gone to the bathroom or something and missed that. I don't know, because I tweeted out. I was like, "Where's Jahmyr Gibbs?" Because Montgomery was iffy entering the game, and then he had 12 more carries than Gibbs. And I tweeted that out, and I mean, no one said anything. I thought maybe someone would point out an injury or something, but no one did. But maybe that happened, and I just missed it. That's
what my recollection. I mean, everything blends together right now after all the turkey and trying to stay awake. But no, that was a very interesting game, and in fact, I'll mention it right now. This should be a proclamation that starting now, henceforth, and forever, from here to eternity, when there are clock management issues that go wrong at the late stages of games, they shall now be referred to as an Eberflus.
I love it.
He did it again. I mean, that's the third time in 5 weeks. 4 weeks.
What is going through his mind, do you think?
Nothing.
Nothing. He just
I mean, that's why they lost that field goal blocked against Green Bay.
Right.
And then I don't know if you want to blame it on him or the offensive coordinator. The play that set up the Hail Mary, where nobody was guarding the out of bounds lines, the sidelines, and the receiver went out there to set up the positioning for the Hail Mary. So, I mean, the only and he received little attention because no one was worse than as a coach than Brandon Staley. If people want to say Eberflus is a good coach, that's who he's compared to. But no, I mean, I've maintained, I've been advocating it on radio shows and everything for years and years, that in NFL teams, with the importance of such a short schedule, you've got to have a coach in charge of clock management, situational management, because the coaches are so involved in the X's and O's on a game, on a play-to-play basis, on a drive-to-drive basis, that they need someone who has the responsibility of telling the coach when to call timeout, when not to call timeout. Maybe not so much when to use a challenge. That's pretty much for up in the booth who are able to see the replays. But clock management, and there should also be someone who is also involved in making sure that you don't commit delay of game penalties. That is the most inexcusable penalty. And by the way, if it's in the first quarter and time is running out and it's 7 minutes in and it's a scoreless game, take the 5 yards. Don't waste the timeout.
Right. They waste so many timeouts. I was still so dumbfounded by it. I mean, we obviously saw it before, but this was so egregious. I was just yelling at the TV. It's like timeout.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I lost the bet, but I stacked the Lions Bears game in my main DraftKings lineup, so I was hoping for overtime. And that didn't happen. And actually, we almost hit the same game parlay in the first game too. I just missed on Sam Laporta's receiving yards, so I thought there was a chance that he would get there as well in overtime. But yeah, that's I think the Bears are an interesting team for next year. And I mean, it doesn't matter for handicapping this show, but the past 4 games, they'd had a Hail Mary loss. They had the block field goal loss. They had the overtime loss to Minnesota, and then today's loss.
The overtime loss to Minnesota is a little bit different to the extent that they had to really pull a lot of rabbits out of the hat just to get to overtime. I mean, it's still a close loss, but remember, they're down 27-16, in the final minute? Then they score the touchdown to make it 27-22. They are successful on the 2-point conversion. And then in the rarest of rarities, they were successful on recovering the onside kick and then still getting into position. So, yeah, it was a tough loss, but I would say that the other three are clearly ones that they could have, if not should have won. Certainly, you would think they should have won that game against Green Bay with the blocked field goal had they moved the ball a little bit closer. Okay, and not had had a little higher trajectory from the kicker, and then of course the Hail Mary pass against the Commanders. If they had on the play before that made the guy stay in bounds by guarding the sideline a little better, maybe they never get to that position to have the Hail Mary pass, or certainly if they do, maybe it's not from a little closer than it turned out to be. Which of course the pass was caught on the the 2-yard line or something. It was tackled before he got to the end zone. But yeah, those are all good. Yeah, the Bears could easily. In fact, I think I talked about it actually before last week's game when I did like the Bears and was fortunate to get the cover at the +3.5. That the Bears could easily have been 6-4 as they were 4-6 because of the two losses. They were 4-2 heading out of the break. Out of their bye week, and that's when they had the Washington loss. Then I think they had a couple of losses in between. I want to say the Cardinals was one of them. I forget. New England was the other. And then they had the fourth game in that sequence that had that losing streak. I think at the time up to 4 was the game last week to Minnesota. So what's it now? I think they've lost 5 in a row.
Yeah, they were 4-2 coming out of the bye. So yeah,
so maybe it's 6. Maybe it's 6 in a row now. There may be another game in there.
Yeah, so I mean, this team could easily be 7-5 right now if they were better coached. I think that if they get a good coach next year, maybe a guy who knows that they have 3 times perhaps, not 2.
And we were talking before the show. We talked about the defense, the red zone defense. I mean, I don't know what the exact yardage totals, but I know when I checked it, probably with a few minutes before halftime, the Lions had gained 253 yards, and the Bears had gained 45. And one of the things that the Bears have done really over the last part of over the second half of the season, they've been allowing a ton of yardage, but it's that red zone defense that causes the numbers that we look at. Are you familiar with yards per point, which I think is somewhat of a meaningless metric, but it is a comparative metric? You divide the yards by the points you score on offense, or yards allowed divided by points on defense. Well, their yards per point allowed on defense is extremely high because they're forcing teams to settle in the red zone for field goals, 3 points, rather than getting the full touchdown. Okay, especially when you take out of the equation, yards per point, you take out the points that are attributable to the defense and special teams, not don't include those points as far as what the defense has allowed, because they allowed the yardage perhaps, but they ultimately did not allow the points that result from, let's say, setting the opposition up in good field position or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard you mention that metric before. It's interesting. It's not
that's from the day before we had analytics, and the day before we had actually it really came about, I want to say, in either the late 1970s or early 1980s, as personal computers were coming around, and it was a lot easier to do math and all that, and then do spreadsheets and things and be able to compare teams. And it's almost like the measure that I use that I call efficiency, which is the correlation or lack thereof between yards gained and points scored, or yards allowed and points allowed. That you would think that if you rank highly in one, you should rank highly in the other. And if you don't, it means that either you're getting, for example, additional points by defensive plays, or you are allowing too many points without the benefit of creating turnovers.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting metric. I should maybe pay more attention to it. So, maybe we should jump into these games here.
Sure.
I like this post from
Cassandra. Yeah, we probably have to spend a little less time tangentially, because I think everybody's falling asleep because of all the turkey.
I know, yeah, the tryptophan.
It's late at night back east for you guys.
Right. Yeah, it's 12:43 a.m. here. Yeah, although I am used to staying up to 6, but not too many people are crazy like I am. Speaking of, Cassandra says only extreme ill human beings are here on Thanksgiving night handicapping NFL games. Welcome to the party, everyone. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I was telling Evan that we're going to do a show tonight, and he was like, "You guys are going to be the only people on YouTube. This is going to be great." So hopefully we get some.
Well, that'll certainly help the streaming.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So maybe
less bandwidth out there being taken up.
Yeah, maybe these YouTube ads will pay us 53 cents instead of 51 cents. It's fantastic. All right, let's get to these games here. We have the Black Friday game, which is at 3:00. Kind of an annoying start time, but I think they have to do it for the high school rules or something. So we have Raiders and Chiefs. This line is
you know what? I think so, but I think don't a lot of high schools. I think their seasons are over. Maybe the playoffs are on, but again, it's Thanksgiving weekend, so I don't know. Well, maybe sports are different. I think that the schools could have if they're playing playoffs, and a lot of them, a lot of them do play. I think on Friday afternoons and Friday nights.
Yeah, I think my high school would always play like the Friday after Thanksgiving at like 11 a.m. I think that's when our big rivalry was. Our Central High School versus Northeast High School. I think that's what it was. I don't know. I only went to one game, so I would not know. But anyway, we have the Chiefs are favored by 13. Some injury notes here. Isaiah Pacheco is going to be back. He has no injury designation. The Raiders are down their top two corners again, which was the case last week. I usually
they're starting quarterback.
Yes,
Minshew out. So O'Connell's back in there now.
Aiden O'Connell's back. I thought we might see Desmond Ridder when that broken.
So did the Chiefs. Chiefs were hoping for that.
Yeah, and so it's going to be Aiden O'Connell, but statistically he does not rank well. If you take out garbage time, last year there were only two quarterbacks worse than him in EPA. Those were Easton Stick and Deshaun Watson. Funny.
How do they define garbage time? Down by 14 or more points or something, or
it's less than a 10% chance of winning. So it would mean any fourth quarter deficit of 14 or more.
Oh, the thing, I was going to say how you determine a 10% chance, because that's subjective to a certain extent. Again, based upon how many possessions are left in the game. Maybe you do it based upon the average length of those teams' possessions, and with 8 minutes and 40 seconds to go left in the fourth quarter, maybe because those teams tend to have, let's say, extended drives, maybe there's only two possessions left for each team, as opposed to like pass-happy teams with incompletions where you might get 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think there's a formula they use with amount of time versus how many points you're down, and whether or not you have possession. Because sometimes you see that on TV. You'll see
timeouts, I guess, have to be a factor as well.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I think that timeouts would probably just add 40 seconds to the clock. So they probably you see it on TV sometimes where they say percentage chance to win 88%. Like they'll sometimes do that. So I think there's a formula out there for that. So I think that's how they determine it. So like I said, taking out garbage time, there are only two quarterbacks worse than Aiden O'Connell last year. There's Easton Stick and Deshaun Watson. So as far as this game's concerned, I like the Chiefs here. I don't usually take them by margin just because they're like an NBA team. They fool around during the regular season and then they bring it in the playoffs, which I assume is going to happen again. But I think they'd have to remember the last year's loss to the Raiders on Christmas, and I don't know if they want to fall to the Raiders again on a holiday game. So I feel like we're going to see a better effort from them this week, and still have some concern. I think there could still be a garbage time touchdown, like we saw that in the first meeting between these two teams.
Yeah.
But I'm still favoring the Chiefs here. This is not a big play for me. I like it a little bit. So what do you think about this game?
Well, I can't back the Raiders.
Yeah.
But I can't back the Chiefs because they have not been able to put teams away this year like they were doing on a fairly regular basis. Not even last year, but years previous. I mean, Mahomes is a year older, Kelsey's a year older, the linemen are years older, etc. And you wonder if they're just going to, just do enough to win. I mean, look, they nearly blew the game last week to Carolina on the road after they were up, 27 was it 27-16 or something? I think it was something along those lines. Similar like I think the Bears score was almost the same because they both ended up with 30-27 games, ironically enough. Yeah, it was because it was 27-19, I think, in the Carolina game. And they scored I think it was a touchdown, a 2-point conversion to get to 19-27. Mm-hmm. And intangibly, I think if I remember correctly, after the game, weren't the Raiders like whooping it up right in the parking lot or something, and dissing Chiefs fans or something like that? Being silly, doing like like what we used to do in high school. Okay, taunt the other team and just revel in it because it's such a rarity for our team in high school and for the Raiders in the NFL against Kansas City in recent years, and that was a big win for them. And I think a lot of people also looked at it as probably being the win that got Antonio Pierce the full-time job with the Raiders, because he was very popular amongst the players. Of course, almost anyone would have been after Josh McDaniels, but nonetheless, I can't feel good about laying this number with the Chiefs. Would I be surprised if the game ends up 34-10? No, but I can't predict it either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the defense is still solid, but then again, that's the defense that let Carolina back in the game last week.
Yeah, they did.
They had a comfortable lead. So,
yeah.
And again, I think a lot of it goes to the fact, and you wouldn't think so because there's so much time between the end of one season and the start of another, but those added games that you play in the playoffs, if you're playing 2, 3, sometimes 4 games a season, which is, if you're a wild card team and you go to the Super Bowl, okay, you will have had to play 4 games in the playoffs. That's basically a quarter of a full season right after a season that you just played. Yeah. And that has to take a toll. And I've mentioned it. I think we even talked here about it last week or the week before. It's like in the NBA, you got to win 4 series of, 7-game series, I think, a 5-game and a 7-game, 3 7-game series. So you're playing, when you're Golden State Warriors and you're winning, or in the finals, 3-4 years in a row, you've played the equivalent of a full season relative to like all the teams that don't make the playoffs, or just playing, 3 regular seasons in that same time span. And it just takes a lot of wear and tear on the body. I mean, it's almost like you could say it's somewhat analogous to running backs having very short careers when they were being used so often, 300, 350 rushing attempts per year. That's going to wear the body down. And I think it's the same thing when you play a significant number of postseason games in a relatively short season span.
Yeah, and that's exactly why they have to take it easy. In some of these games, they can't go all out. And like, why would they? They did it last year. Everyone wrote them off after they lost to the Raiders, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. So they have the formula down. And you're right. Like, it's so hard to back the Chiefs with such a high number. But if I had to choose, I can't go with the Raiders, especially with O'Connell.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're on the same page here.
It's either play the Chiefs or pass the game. However, if you play the Chiefs, do it cautiously.
Yeah, and as Cassandra says, this is a pure motivational psychological play, based on what happened last year. And if you buy into that, I think the Chiefs are definitely on the right side. I do to an extent, but
I'll talk about. I love motivational psychological plays, and I'll get to one when we come up in a few games here. But you still, it's one thing if it's a small point spread and asking a team to win, because the team, even though you want to beat a team as badly as you can, the idea is to get the win, whether it's 1 point or by 21 points. You want to get the win. And, of course, this is a big number. And you do point out the possibility of the backdoor cover, because the Raiders have done that, several times this week. I mean, it's this season. In fact, I even remember, actually it cost them. I think they were leading at halftime the opening game of the year at the Chargers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I don't think the Raiders have quit. They just don't have the talent to get and maintain leads pretty much, because they've got a woeful offensive line. They've got no running game whatsoever. They're either 31st or 32nd just in the pure basic rushing yards per game stats. And it's not because, they pass the ball like crazy, because they're not all that great at passing the football, but at least they're, fair to middling in that, but they're horrible in running the football, and that's because of the offensive line, and that puts additional pressure on the quarterback. They just don't have a lot of talent out there. I mean, their most valuable player probably Brock Bowers, the rookie tight end on offense, and of course Max Crosby on defense. But there's not a lot else to really say that this has the makings of an all-star team.
My fear here is that we're going to see the same thing that would happen in the Lions-Bears game, where the Chiefs get out to a big lead, and then slowly but surely whittles away in the second half, and then O'Connell throws a backdoor touchdown with like a minute left. So
and there again, by the way, you're also talking about, as with the Lions today, you're talking about the Chiefs as a home team.
Yeah, exactly. I the way I might play this game is just to bet the Chiefs in the first half, and if they're losing at halftime, then definitely play them in the second half. So that's how I think I'm going to approach this one. So let's get to the Sunday slate here. The first game up is Titans at the Redskins. This line is Washington minus 5.5, which is it's an extreme line move from the advanced spread that we had before the week 12 games. Washington was -8, and now it's gone down 2.5 points through 7 and 6. The second and third most likely results of any NFL game, so it's very significant. It's 2 injury developments, Brian Robinson and Marshawn Lattimore. They were both limited twice this week, so we might see Lattimore for the first time in Washington. I really thought Brian Robinson would be out, but the fact that he's limited, maybe he won't miss any action. I like Washington to bounce back. There's 2 factors here. Washington coming off this dreadful loss to Dallas. I think I theorized this on Tuesday. I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like Washington had like a watch party on Monday night when Dallas played Houston, because that was the upcoming opponent. And they saw Dallas just humiliate themselves, and they're probably laughing the whole time. They're like, "Oh, we're going to beat this team," and they sleepwalked through that game. Like they're making so many mistakes. So I think they'll bounce back. And then you have Tennessee, which is a bad team coming off a win. Bad teams usually have trouble sustaining success. Will Levis can be a disaster with his turnovers. He can make some great plays, but he can make some boneheaded mistakes too and take a ton of sacks. Washington could get after the quarterback. I think that Washington wins this one pretty comfortably. So what do you think about this one?
Yeah, if I do it, I don't know I'm going to play this one because I still have concerns with Levis, although he has played well a little bit the last few weeks compared to what he had done before when he was basically a human turnover machine. He still has that issue, but it seems to have leveled off a little bit. Washington. You also wonder now with Daniels, the quarterback. He's now played 11, 12 games. Well, that's the length of a basic college football season, and you wonder if he's starting to wear down a little bit because his performance in the last few games has, been much diminished from what he did his first 5 or 6 games. So you wonder if that's taking a toll on him as a rookie, all of a sudden being thrown into playing a game, playing a season that's 17 games long as opposed to 12 regular season games in college, maybe an extra game if you make a conference championship game and or a bowl after that. So he's at about that point right now that he might be suffering a little bit of fatigue, because I do like this Washington team, and I do think that they're going to be one of the I thought last year that one of the teams that was going to be a fashionable play this year if they made the coaching change, and they did, were the Chargers, because you could see how close they were last year in so many games, but coaching cost them. Now, it's not the coaching that's costing Washington right now, because I think they have developed a lot quicker than a lot of people expected. He's a rookie head coach only to the extent that Quinn is in his first year at Washington. He's an experienced first-year coach, let's say that, with Washington. And, of course, the rookie quarterback and, his indoctrination into the NFL. He certainly got off to a very quick start, but maybe now we're starting to see, and again, I think it's probably more fatigue than mechanics or anything else that is holding him back. So I think that Washington, much like I thought the Chargers were going to be a popular team in the offseason for this year because their record was a lot lower than their play on the field suggested, and with a couple of breaks, what was it, 6 or 7, 3-point games or 4-point games or less, that their 5-12 last year for the Chargers could have easily been 12-5. Okay, with a coaching change, I said when it was Harbaugh, I said, 6 of those games that they would have lost by 3 points or 4 points or less, Harbaugh would have won half of them just based on the difference in coaching. And I think that Washington, although it's not the same analogy because Washington is not, poorly coached, they made a lot of progress too quickly. They're 7-5, so they're certainly very much in the wild card picture, but it's a shaky 7-5. But I do think this is a good spot for them to get healthy against a Tennessee team that is still a very bad team. Now, their defensive numbers are pretty decent, and Washington had been, I don't know if I could say that right now, had been a very strong offensive team, but they might be able to do some damage and, again, force Tennessee to play from behind, and that's not the strength of Levis.
Yeah, definitely not. So I'll be looking to bet Will Levis over interceptions, which we've done.
Excuse me. And by the way, did you say they're favored by 6 now?
It said 5.5. I'm still seeing 5.5 in most.
Okay, yeah. If you see 6, you might consider the teaser. Not at 5.5 though.
Yeah, it's I'm not. Yeah, circa 6 105. That's it. I see 5.5 everywhere else. Yeah. Okay, all right. Let's get to the next game. And I think we're gonna disagree on this one. I think. So the Chargers at the Falcons. This line is down to 1. It started at 2. I think the line move is based on injuries. So for the Chargers, you have Denzel Perriman, DMP twice, and J.K. Dobbins, DMP twice. I expected Dobbins to be out, so that's not a real surprise. They called him week to week, so I didn't think he's going to play. Perriman, though, he's the key to the run defense, which you would expect against Bijan Robinson. It would be a bad omen for him to be out. And then Atlanta, they're going to have some of their injured cornerbacks coming back before the bye against Denver. They're missing 3 of their top 4 cornerbacks, so they'll be healthier. So I can understand why this line is moving toward Atlanta, but I still like the Chargers here. I just think that they're the better team. Atlanta really hasn't impressed me when they've gone outside the division. Like most of their wins this year have come outside the division. Obviously, they had like that fluky win in week 2 against the Eagles where Saquon Barkley drops a pass and then they had that late touchdown drive. So they have had success outside the division, but most of the games outside of the NFC South have been disastrous. And I think the Chargers coming off a loss is just such a good spot for a great coach team like Jim Harbaugh. If you look at Jim Harbaugh's record, if you throw out 2014 with the Niners because he basically had one foot out the door, he is off a loss. His teams are 10-3 against the spread. Just very impressive coming off defeats. And they just played a superior Baltimore team that was also coming off a loss. Now they're the ones coming off a loss, and I know Atlanta is too. But I just grade the Chargers much better than the Falcons, and I think that they could bounce back. And you could maybe argue it's a tough spot because they played on the West Coast on Monday. They're playing on the East Coast here, but these teams that are well coached generally do a good job of in these situations. The Rams were in this same exact spot a couple weeks ago where they played the Dolphins on Monday Night Football. They lost, and they were at New England, and they won pretty comfortably. So I think the Chargers are going to take this one. So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm sort of indecisive on this one because I can make a good case for either teams. It's a good spot for Atlanta, especially coming off of what was it last week? I think they were on their bye.
Yeah.
So they've had time to regroup again, get a little bit healthier than they had been over the previous few weeks. I still like Kirk Cousins as a quarterback. He's the second best quarterback in this game. Obviously, I think the Dobbins injury will certainly, I think, have some impact on the game because the Chargers under Harbaugh especially love to run the football, and they've done it exceptionally well. I can certainly make a case for both teams in this game because the Chargers are the better football team. Going across the country with a little bit shorter work week is a little bit of a concern, but I think it really comes down to how well Atlanta plays. We thought that that the NFC South was going to be the league's weakest division, and along with the AFC South, which we're starting to see tail off a little bit too, and it's been that way for quite a number of years with the NFC South. That was a division that for many years never had a repeat champion. Because there's so closeness in the talent and everything. And really, when you took a look at the start of the season, if you're talking in mid-September, whoa, look at the Saints, the way they won their first 2 games against Carolina and Dallas. And, of course, they had all the injuries. Tampa Bay, was not performed well. Yeah, they had that win against the Giants, although, big deal. It has to count in the standings, though. But, that's not exactly it's not so. If I were going for a job interview and I put on my coach, well, we beat the New York Giants, I wouldn't necessarily, that's a positive as far as getting the job is concerned. But nonetheless, Tampa Bay has not played as well as they did earlier in the year. Carolina started to play a little bit better, but still not a very good football team. But if Bryce Young can show any development, I'd keep an eye on Carolina because I like a lot of the parts that they have on that team, and if they could just get that quarterback situation resolved. And then you come down to Atlanta, which I think a lot of people at the beginning of the season, I think, what was their win total? 9.5, something like that. Thought that they were clearly the best team in that division. But you talk about, remember that home loss, the 20-point home loss to Seattle a few weeks before the bye. That's a little bit concerning. The Chargers are the better team. But I also think that this is one of those statement games for Atlanta that if they want to take control of the division, even though it's a non-division game, they are in sore need of a win. So I think that the week off is a big benefit for a team like that. But at the same time, the Chargers are the better team. So I will probably, pass on that one, especially with the line coming down the way it did because I was looking at Atlanta first. If that line had gone from 2.5 to 3, I'd be on Atlanta. But it's gone from 2.5 down to 2, down to 1.5. Yeah. So I'm going to pass on that one. Maybe if I did anything, I might look under the total in this game.
Okay.
Because I think that certainly with the Chargers, they're going to have an emphasis on the running game.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Dobbins out, it's gonna be tougher for them to run. I hope they don't go to Gus Edwards. I think he's awful. I would like to see them run Kamani Vidal instead. He's an unknown for the most part, but he can't be worse than Dobbins. Not Dobbins, Edwards, who just feel like he's only in the NFL because the Ravens or the Chargers have a bunch of former Ravens on their coaching staff.
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason. So, all right, let's get to Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. This line was 2.5. It's up to 3. Orlando Brown was limited twice, so maybe that is the reason for the move here. We had a question in the chat on Tuesday asking about Orlando Brown, and looks like he might come back, which would be a nice boost for the Bengals. I'm pretty conflicted on this game just because you have Mike Tomlin coming off a loss and as an underdog, which is generally, two great spots for him. So if you're going to fade Pittsburgh,
which by the way, before you continue, which makes you a little go, you take a look at the line. What's Pittsburgh? What's their record and what's Cincinnati's record? Yet Pittsburgh is a road favorite.
Right.
They're a road underdog, just like a few weeks ago. What was it? Oh, it was a game. I forget where they were a road underdog and they won the game outright.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just a little curious, that line.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is very curious. And I think it's because people know Cincinnati needs to win this game, whereas Pittsburgh can eat a loss here and still be okay. Although that would hurt their chances of winning the division. Still, Cincinnati, this is just much more desperate for them. But as we know, we've said this quote many times. Just because the team needs a win, doesn't mean they're going to get it. It's not, Cincinnati's not guaranteed to get it, and this almost feels like the Jets, where the Jets keep being favored and they keep losing. I think that they are better than the Jets.
I just think Cincinnati's been a more proven team over the recent few years. A couple of Super Bowl appearances and things like that, than the Jets, who the closest they've got to the Super Bowl was a tailgate party in a parking lot.
You're right about that, but this Cincinnati team feels different because their defense is a lot worse. They've lost so many players defensively. DJ Reader, for example, they lost Jesse Bates a couple years ago. Like they're just down so many defensive players that they had when they were playing for those Super Bowls. That it's basically a shell of its former self, and they can't stop anyone. But they still have Joe Burrow, they still have Chase, they still have Higgins. Chase Brown looks fantastic. Orlando Brown might be back, so this team might be able to score here. And so that's why I'm also considering Cincinnati, just because it's a desperation spot, but their offense is so good. I think they could kind of crack through Pittsburgh's defense, which is still going to not have Alex Highsmith, and all they really have is TJ Watt rushing the passer. And so the Steelers' pressure rate numbers are pretty down compared to where they normally are. So I am leaning Cincinnati, but I don't know. Maybe you have a stronger take on this game.
Yeah, I love Cincinnati. I think it's my favorite play of the week, actually. This is desperate. You mentioned desperation. This is all-in time for Cincinnati. And you know what? They have a realistic path to the playoffs, and I'm going to explain that. They're 4-7 right now, okay? And they're off a bye. And they're catching Pittsburgh. Yeah, I know it's tough going against Pittsburgh as an underdog and after a loss. This is a Cleveland sandwich for Pittsburgh because they just played at Cleveland and they host Cleveland next week. So this is the game that's in the middle of those games. But it's not so much Pittsburgh; it's Cincinnati. They're off their bye, so they've had an opportunity to make the necessary adjustments, get healthy, etc. But look at what happens after they play Pittsburgh. The good chance that the Bengals could be favored in each of the next 3 games. Okay, so if they win, they're 5-7 this week. After this week, then they're at Dallas on a Monday night. They're at Tennessee, and then they host Cleveland in Week 16.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
all 3 of those games are winnable, and if they win those games, they're 8-7 with 2 weeks to go. And guess who they play in Week 17? Okay, at home they host a team that they would be competing against for a wild card, the Denver Broncos. So they might even be a game behind Denver at that time. And if they beat Denver, they hold the tiebreaker edge over them. And then they end the season in Week 18. They got to play in Pittsburgh. Well, you know what? Pittsburgh's not getting the number 1 seed in the AFC this year. They're going to have to play wild card weekend. They might be resting their starters in that game against Cincinnati in Week 18. At least that's the thought process going in, as to, even though it looks hopeless for Cincinnati, they have a realistic possibility of winning out or being able to possibly even afford one loss down the stretch, but it starts with a win in this game.
Yeah, I know. You're definitely right about that. You make a good point. I just real worry about this defense, like being able to stop anything. That's my main hang up.
Well,
But
yeah, I'll go. Let me address that, by the way, because I'm
yeah,
going to go back to that game last week against the Chargers. Okay,
mhm.
a couple of weeks ago, when they had some success after having difficulty in that game. So I think they gained what was it? The game. I don't recall exactly how that game unfolded right now, but I remember that there were some good signs that the Bengals showed in that game in defeat.
Yeah, it was 27-6. They stormed back, and
Yeah,
then
and
they
then
missed
they
they
lost
missed
on the
two
field
field
goal at
goals.
the end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they missed two field goals in the fourth quarter.
yeah,
Really,
yeah.
yeah. So Zach
which
Taylor doing
which
the same
which
thing
is
he did the other night.
which was a disappointing way to enter their bye week. But given how that game played out, it was not a discouraging way to end the bye week,
Yeah, you're
because
right.
they obviously made some halftime adjustments that held what the Chargers have, two field goals in the second half.
Hmm. Yeah,
Something like that. So, they played a little bit better. I mean, because it's hard to argue the talent that they have on that team. Um, but look, we saw it after they made the Super Bowl to the Rams. They dropped off a little bit, and then they've come back a little bit. So it's just a good spot. I know they have the talent, and they're finally, especially on offense, for the most part, they're as healthy as they've been since the early part of the season. When they were without Chase and Higgins, one or both of them for the first month or so.
yeah, and especially if Orlando Brown returns.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. The schedule they have upcoming is very favorable. Although, if you ask the Fox pregame analysts, I love how they just said, "Oh, if Dallas wins today, they'll beat Cincinnati, then they'll beat Carolina." I'm like, wait a second. Why are they going to beat Cincinnati next week? I don't know if I agree with that. But
No, that's what I'm saying. That I would think that I'm saying if Cincinnati beats Pittsburgh this week,
right.
I think they'll be favored at Dallas. I don't know what the advanced line is yet on that. I didn't take a look at it yet, but and maybe I'll do that when you're going over the next game, and I'll take a look at that line. But I can certainly see.
I can tell you this right now. It's Bengals -6.5 at Dallas.
Wow, that line seems way too high.
I don't know. It seems high, but I think I still take Cincinnati there.
Yeah, no.
The
Well,
line will move, though. It will move based on Dallas's win today, though.
yeah, and it may move, and it certainly might. Well, no, you know what? It might move. It might move back up if they beat Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
That'll be a win over a quality team.
Yeah, it depends how convincing the win is.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. So I don't think it'll be 6.5. Might be like 5.5.
Yeah, that still seems a little high, because you do have to wonder. Dallas is such a bad team, but they've got 2 wins in a row, both against division rivals, one on the road.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't pretty. Look, Washington doesn't miss that extra point. Yeah. They're still playing in overtime. Because Dallas ran the kickback, didn't they? Right after that extra point, the onside kick attempt.
Yeah, foolishly ran back the kick and kept the game alive. But today, Drew Lock just gave the game away. I don't even know if I'd factor in any performances against the Giants going forward.
Yeah. No, but you know what? It's still an NFL team, and they can feel like they can compete a little. We, the media, I don't even know about the fans. The fans are always optimistic, but the objective analysts will say, "Hey, you're not that very good, and big deal. You beat the Giants and you beat the Commanders, and you had a big lead and you let it fritter away and all that." But it's what the players think, because they're the ones out there on the field who have to decide, you know what? I think I'll give some energy today because we can win this game, and then who knows what can happen. Well, they've done it twice in a row now, so maybe there's a little bit of a change in the mindset. I'm not suggesting that anyone play Dallas based on that. I'm just saying that, maybe we don't want to, my thought today was that the Dallas Giants game could be very ugly because neither team wanted to win because they both had a chance at the top draft choice. Well, the Giants certainly played that way. The Cowboys didn't.
No, and I think if the next game Dallas loses, I think they're an automatic fade the next week, because their playoff chances will be completely over. Whereas
right now, 5-7 now, right?
Yeah, so they could still finish 10-7 theoretically, although they have to beat the Eagles and the Redskins again. It's not gonna happen.
Well, the 9-8 might be a wild card tiebreaker.
Yeah, it could be. Well,
because you take a look at the NFC South. is only going to get a division. So a wild card won't come there. You'll get one wild card,
Well,
most likely from the East, Philly, Washington.
Yeah, and then you have two from the North, though. You have Vikings and Packers, so they have to beat the Packers, who are 9-3 right now, or the
Vikings. Also because the West probably doesn't get a wild card.
Right. So
everybody's 6-5 or 5-6.
Right. The team they'd have to catch is Washington, 7-5. That's the only team they can really catch right now.
Well, so they're 7-5, and Dallas is 5-7.
Yeah. So
they could be 6-7, and Washington could be 7-6 before they meet.
Yeah. Well, if Washington loses Tennessee, yeah.
But I'm still saying Cincinnati's going to beat Dallas.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but I'm trying to put myself in the head of those who are looking at Dallas. That you talk about teams making runs with mediocre records right now. Miami, I didn't expect them to win tonight, but they still have a chance because they do have a fairly soft schedule. The key game was also the Bears game because they have they have perhaps the toughest schedule in NFL history over the last, I think, 6 games. So they weren't going to do anything even if they had won, and they're going to regret those losses the last few weeks. But Dallas, or Cincinnati rather, has the kind of schedule that, as we talked about before, it is a very manageable schedule because the 2 toughest games, and those will be the 2 toughest opponents by far of the next 5. That's Denver, who they get at home in Week 17, and back in Pittsburgh, who may rest players in 18.
Yeah, that's true. Although for Denver, keep in mind that they get Kansas City in Week 18, and if the Chiefs have the number 1 seed wrapped up, then we could see Carson Wentz starting for the Chiefs too. So,
well, if they have the number 1 seed wrapped up, they may play a half because then they would be going 2 full weeks without playing.
Yeah,
because they wouldn't play in Week 18 and they wouldn't play during the wild card week, and you don't want to build up too much. So maybe you give the starters a little bit of action, and a little bit of action could be a 14-0 lead before the 3rd drive. Although not the way Kansas City's been playing this year, but
right.
Still, but you have to also think that Kansas City would be playing well towards the end of the season, notwithstanding last year's loss to the Raiders.
Yeah, Mahomes always wants to play in those meaningless games. Whether it's the preseason or late in the year, he'll definitely be vying to be on the field. So, all right, let's get to the next game. We have Colts at the Patriots. Neither team had their bye yet, so they had that coming up in Week 14. The Colts
next weekend.
The Colts were -2.5, and then they were up to 3, and now they're back down to 2.5. I think they went down to 2.5 because of some injuries here. So Josh Downs DNP twice, and Alec Pierce DNP twice. So you have cluster injuries at receiver, although for the Colts, not as big of a deal because they still have Michael Pittman Jr. and Adonai Mitchell, who I think is going to be outstanding. So very excited for Adonai Mitchell to see him get a lot of action this week. I definitely plan on playing him on DraftKings. Braden Smith, also another talented lineman. He was also DNP twice. So no one on the Patriots team has missed practice this week, which is a rarity. It's usually like they have this long injury report with like all DNPs and limited, but they're all going to be healthy. And so I was heading into this week thinking I was going to bet the Colts or at least pick the Colts. because I think they're the much better team. Whereas the Patriots are, it's just not very good. The way they just couldn't compete against Miami last week was just pretty telling. But with the Colts having these injuries and the Patriots getting healthier, I am sort of considering going back to the Patriots, but I don't really find this game appealing at all. I can't figure this one out. So do you have a strong take here?
Not a strong take, but it was a bad spot, I think, for New England last week playing in Miami, because Miami, they had shown since Tua came back that this is a playoff caliber roster, as everyone expected at the start of the season. And they know they have momentum. And in fact, I think we mentioned it last week when I made a case for Miami, because they knew, that they had this game in Green Bay, which was going to be very difficult for them to win. And so they couldn't afford to let a win slip away from them last week. The first game was 15-10 up in New England, but they were playing well enough that, again, we talked about it, or at least I mentioned it, they could have been 4-0 since Tua came back, because they had lost on that last play against the Cardinals. And then, the following week, they rallied to tie Buffalo and lost on the last second field goal. So they had been playing well, and, just talent-wise, they were much better than New England. One thing about New England, I do take a look at first and second half stats. So right now we're talking about games 1 through 6 and 7 through 12. And the Patriots have been their running game has declined, but their passing game has gained almost 66 yards per game with the insertion of Drake May, whatever game that was, 6 or 7, I think. Indianapolis numbers have gone down. Their rushing has stayed about the same. The Colts, their first and second half numbers are not that much different as far as where they've shown there. They've gone down a little bit on offense, but they've improved on defense. And the Patriots, who were very good against the run early in the season, then went bad. Their numbers have started to trend back towards decent performances now. Don't know if I will play the game, but I certainly could consider, especially with Indianapolis playing all these close games, certainly could consider teasing New England up to +9. Or +8.5, but certainly +9. But again, 2.5 to 8.5 is good enough for me, and maybe even consider a money line play on them.
Yeah, I think with all these injuries for the Colts, I think the teasing the Patriots is the way to go. Otherwise, I really don't have any interest here outside of potential player props. Or, like I said, watching Adonai Mitchell, I can't wait to see what he does in this game. By the
way, a meeting of Indianapolis. Remember, a rare road favorite. I thought Indianapolis should have been favored on the road against the Jets, and they weren't. And had they been a 2-point favorite, they wouldn't have covered because they won 28-27. Mm-hmm. But here they are the favorite. They are the better team. But I'm liking what I'm seeing out of New England. There's another team that's not quitting, and I think they made the right decision to put Drake May in there, and Gerard Mayo, defensive experience and all that. I think he's doing as decent a good job as he could do given the roster.
I can't wait to see Drake May with some offensive talent. Their left tackle committed 4 penalties last week. The right tackle got benched, and they had no number 1 receiver at all. So they have a lot of work to do this offseason, but if they put in the right pieces around May, you're right. I mean, their defense is still good. And
they're going up against Anthony Richardson. And they're going up against Anthony Richardson, who can look beautiful at times, and very next drive,
Yeah. No, the Patriots have some good aspects to their defense, but they tend to get gashed in the running game. But they had, like I said, if they make the right moves in the offseason, then they can certainly compete for maybe a wild card spot next year. We'll see.
That might be an overly optimistic, but they could perhaps compete for maybe a 500 season, maybe a 7 or 8 win season.
Yeah, something like that. It depends what they do. I think they have a lot of cap space, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So if they get some really good free agents, and then they ace their draft. I
don't know what their draft capital is, as far as draft choices. But by the way, one thing about this game also, and I think it should be obvious about. With the Colts and Richardson, is both of these teams are relatively turnover prone. 12 games, the Colts have lost 18 turnovers. The Patriots have lost 16 turnovers. At least the Colts have been able to force or benefit from 17 takeaways. When I say benefit from, they may not force it, but maybe recovered fumbles and things like that that weren't forced or barely forced. New England's only got 9 takeaways this year. That's a little bit of a concern, which, by the way, may make me think a little bit about possibly the under in this game.
Yeah, that makes sense. The Patriots have the 3rd most cap space in the NFL right now. So
there you go.
That's good. And then as far as draft capital, this is a rarity. Every single team has their 1st round draft pick this year, which is bizarre. I don't think I've ever seen that in covering the NFL for all these years. All right,
I don't think that the Jets probably haven't had talks yet to trade away that choice.
They'll have to get another crappy former Packer. They'll trade back for Randall Cobb, even though he's not on a team right now. There's the 1st round pick for Randall Cobb. And like for who? Which team? All right. So we get to Texans and Jaguars. This line has been dropping steadily. It was 5.5. Now it's down to 4. And that is because Trevor Lawrence has been limited in practice twice. It sounds like he's going to return, if I were to guess.
That's why I'm wondering. That's why I'm wondering if the line is dropping because they think he is going to play or he isn't going to play.
Right. Well,
I guess when you consider the backup, maybe that's part of it too.
We've seen Mac Jones, so it's although in fairness, like we saw Trevor Lawrence play hurt at the end of last year, and it was not pretty. Now this is a different sort of injury because it's this non-throwing shoulder. So I don't know how that's going to.
Someone said today they thought he was considering surgery. season-ending surgery.
I heard that too before, so I'm kind of surprised that he's
Limited in practice even.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something to watch out for if you're in the Circa or the Westgate Super Contest, because you're going to get a very favorable number if this is Mac Jones. But if it's Lawrence, I don't really know what to make of this game because, like I said, we saw Lawrence play hurt last year, but non-throwing shoulder. It's not like it's his throwing shoulder or a leg injury like we saw last year or concussion. I don't know how this is going to affect them, despite the reports that you just mentioned. So this is for now, it's a stay away. But if it's announced that Mac Jones is going to play, I will definitely be on Houston because you have Houston being in a good spot coming off a loss. An embarrassing home loss to Tennessee. I think I like good teams bouncing back and then being able to fade Mac Jones against DeMeco Ryans top 10 defense. So I will be on Houston in some sort of fashion. I will bet them heavily if Jones is playing. If it's Lawrence, I'll probably stay away. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how good the Houston defense is. Again, using a basic measure of rushing yards for the first part of the season to the second part of the season, the first 6 games they were allowing 114 rushing yards per. See where it was. 100. I'm sorry, they were allowing. Okay, yeah, no, I don't have that here in front of me. I was looking at it, that their numbers have not been as good, but Jacksonville's has been even worse. However, again, I'm a little concerned about C.J. Stroud. He's clearly regressed from last year. What the cause is, I'm not really sure. Whether it's other teams catching on or whether his offensive coach is not making adjustments. That could be part of it. I mean, look at the Houston. I mean, there's no other team I think that has lost both the Jets and the Titans this year, and that's quite an achievement to be able to. But not the kind of achievement you want to put on that resume with the coaching situation we talked about before, about beating Dallas. I still like Houston as a team. I do like their defense, but I don't like Jacksonville at all. So it's a game I probably can't play, even when I know the status of the quarterback. Yeah, here's a stat I was looking for as far as first half, second goes, and it does involve Jacksonville, not so much Houston. In the first 6 games of the year, Jacksonville allowed 113 yards per game rushing. Over the last 5, I think it's the last 5 games. I think they played 11 games. It's up to 162 for those 5 games. So they have really been able to be run against over the last 4 or 5 games. I don't have the opponents in front of me, but that's regardless of who the opponents are. That's a huge drop-off in what was already an overall defense that wasn't all that great. So, yeah, in fact, I would like to see the line go down. Then I might consider playing Houston, but there are other games I like better that this probably won't be one of mine. I can't even come up with a preference for the over or under in this one.
Yeah. So what you said about the run defense, I think that's one of the reasons why I like the Texans as well, is because one of the issues with C.J. Stroud this year is that the offensive play calling is just so predictable. They run at the highest clip on first and second down. Evan and I were talking about it a few weeks ago, where the first time these teams played each other, the Texans barely survived Jacksonville. The Texans did not have Joe Mixon in that game, and yet Bobby Slowick, their offensive coordinator, just kept running the ball nonstop on first and second down with Cam Akers, and they just weren't getting any yards. It was C.J. Stroud nonstop on like 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8, and he had to bail his team out constantly. But now in this matchup, you have Joe Mixon against a much worse run defense, as you said. I think that favors Houston like immeasurably. So
yeah, if they can get that offensive run pass balance back to 50-50 or so, that's probably a good sign that they're ahead in the game and they're going to win.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll wait on the Lawrence updates. Like I said, if it's Jones, I will definitely back Houston. If it's Lawrence, I don't know. I just wait and see what we get with Lawrence.
But you don't think you'd back Jacksonville in either case?
No,
it's either Houston or pass.
Yeah, because if Lawrence plays, what if he's not? What if he's like what we saw at the end of last year, where he's just? I called him the Black Knight from the Monty Python movie, where it was
I can't see him at close to 100% either way, even if he does play.
Right,
that affects performance.
it was a new injury every single week for him last year, and it was like tis merely a flesh wound. Like he kept playing. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, like Trevor, just sit for a week or two. Like you're just.
And I don't know if you mentioned this, but Houston does have the bye next week. They're one of the teams that has the bye.
Yeah, one of the 6 remaining.
Yeah.
All right, so we get to Arizona at Minnesota. I have no injury updates here. I've absolutely nothing. Just the injury report is very clean. I don't really see anything that would impact this game at all. So this line is Vikings -3.5. I was interested to see if we got some threes. So Minnesota's it's an interesting team to be favored by 3.5 because ever since they lost Christian Darrisaw, you would think that they would decline, but they're actually 4-1 ever since they lost to Darrisaw. They lost that first game to the Rams where he got hurt just before halftime. But after that, they have been undefeated. But if you look at the teams,
by the way, all 3 of those last 3 games on the road.
Yes,
and they won them all.
Yes, but if you look at the opponents, they beat the Colts by 8. That was a lot closer than that even. And that was Joe Flacco. Then the next game, they beat Jacksonville by 5. Very unconvincing victory. Darnold threw 2 interceptions in the red zone. It was Mac Jones, by the way, starting that game. Then they won 23-13 against the Titans. That was their best win in that stretch. And then they beat the Bears in overtime. Now, granted, they had a bigger lead against Chicago, but they allowed Chicago to storm back. Maybe fatigued from that third road game in a row. So we'll see how they hold up here. I don't really want to back this team with that Darrisaw against this is the best team they're going to they've played since they lost Darrisaw, not counting the Rams.
Do you rate Arizona because of the other teams, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Chicago? Mm-hmm. I would say Indianapolis is probably the best of those 4.
Better than Arizona?
No, better than Chicago, Tennessee, or Jacksonville.
Yes,
of those 4 teams. Because then how much better is Arizona than Indianapolis? At quarterback, certainly.
Well, in my power rankings, I have Indianapolis 21st. I have Jacksonville 31st. I have Tennessee 27th, and I have Chicago 22nd.
Where do you have Arizona?
Arizona, I have 13th. So a slightly above average team here versus teams that are either bad or slightly below average. So,
so you do have Indianapolis, the best of those 4 teams, mm-hmm. but still lagging behind Arizona. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So just get the feel for that. Yeah.
Yes, and so that's why I'm leaning Arizona plus 3.5. But I don't know, something about this team. I like the way they came out last week. Like they only scored 6 points against Seattle. They did miss some 2 close touchdowns. There was the throw to McBride in the end zone that was almost complete, and Murray also missed Harrison. That could have been a touchdown. So this game could have flipped, but it was they just looked like the worst team against Seattle. So I kind of wonder maybe Arizona's kind of running on fumes here despite coming off the bye. But so I'm leaning Arizona, but I don't really have a strong take here. So I think we're going to be on opposite sides here, right?
Yeah, I mentioned Pittsburgh being in that Cleveland sandwich. Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland. Same thing for Arizona, and it's also a divisional sandwich because they just lost at Seattle and they host Seattle next week in a key divisional game in a very, very tight division where, as I said, the teams are, 2 of them are 6-5, the other 2 are 5-6. So that could be a big game. I did mention that Minnesota played its last 3 games on the road and they won them all. And that's huge. Probably when it comes down to, if you concede the division to Detroit, it comes down to, tiebreakers for wild cards. Because if you're able to win those games on the road, that's a plus. And now they've got winnable games at home. They play Arizona, Atlanta, and Chicago. They'll be favored over all 3 of those teams, so they'll be favored to win. And Minnesota, again, they're only a game behind Detroit. Detroit's, well, forget today because they played different now, but, Minnesota's what? They're 9-2. Kansas City was 10 and Detroit was 10-1 coming into the day. So Minnesota does have a chance at the well, I guess it would be the number 1 seed. Philadelphia is also 9-2, so they're in the conversation as well. But as far as winning the division, Minnesota's very much in that conversation. And of course, they lost to Detroit at home earlier, and they end the season back-to-back games at home against Green Bay, and then at Detroit. So Minnesota has to consider this an important game, and it's a winnable game. I do like Arizona as a team. I've liked them from the start of the season. I remember having them, plus the 7 at Buffalo to open the season. And, of course, we thought Buffalo was a good team. I don't know if anyone expected Buffalo to perform as well as they have. But given Josh Allen, it's not that much of a surprise, really. But coming into the season, we weren't all that certain about that. So I like Minnesota. I wish the number were 3. When I bet it, I want to see if it goes down to 3 because I'll buy it down to 3 if I have to. But I think it's a good spot. And I think Minnesota can win this game 7 to 10 points.
Okay. Well, I mean, you definitely have more conviction here, so I would trust your opinion more on this one. All right, let's get to the final game of the early slate. We have Seahawks at the Jets. So the Seahawks were favored by 2. It's down to 1.5, and it's because of some injuries, some very troubling injuries here for Seattle. DK Metcalf, DNP twice. Tyler Lockett, DNP twice. Leonard Williams, who's been on a tear, DNP twice. Abraham Lucas, DNP twice. So these are 4 key players. Obviously, Metcalf, Williams, the 2 big guns there, have not practiced at all. So we'll have to see what the Friday injury report looks like. And it's like almost like I'm like, are we going to get roped into betting the Jets one more time when everyone's sworn off them already?
Maybe it's a little different as an underdog. At least you can justify making a bet on a home underdog as opposed to the Jets as a home favorite. Certainly not as a road favorite as they were I think against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, exactly right. So I don't know. For the Jets, Breece Hall returned to practice on a limited basis on Thursday. Tyron Smith did not practice, but Breece Hall. There was some speculation that Braylon Allen would get his start here. We had some fantasy questions about him last night, but Breece Hall appears to be back. I don't want anything to do with this game. Like Seattle's a road favorite off of a big divisional win. Just not interested there.
And a divisional rematch coming up next week.
Exactly. And then the Jets. It's like it reminds me of like in stock trading, like a falling knife. Like like people are like, oh, the stock has dropped to $3. Let me buy it. It's like all time low, and it's like
before it drops to $2.50.
Right. Oh yeah, and then they do a reverse
$2.
Split. Right. Yeah, and they do a reverse split, and then you lose 90% of your shares. So I'm complete pass in this game. I don't know what to make of it. I did favor Seattle before I saw all these injuries, but if all these guys are clear and they don't have injury designations, then I might be back on Seattle. But for now, I just passing. What do you think?
I'm a little bit more enthusiastic about the Jets than I was earlier in the week. The statistics, the numbers are fairly even, especially a couple of the key ones. How bad are the Jets? Well, they are 30th in the league, averaging only 87 offensive rushing yards per game. Seattle's not much better. They average 89. That's 28. They both allow the same 130 rushing yards per game. So it's a weakness against a lesser weakness, the offense against defense. So there's no real edge there. Now the Seahawks do have the passing edge with Geno Smith, 50 yards per game more through the air than the Jets. But conversely, on defense, the Jets are about 40-something yards allowed less. So, the thing that Seattle does best is the thing that the Jets defend best, and neither team can run the football. Again, it's a more difficult. The spot doesn't matter for the Jets; they're going nowhere, so it doesn't. So it's not like they're a look-ahead game for the Jets. I mean, what they're looking ahead to is the end of the season. And that's way down the road. That's another month and a half. But as far as this game goes, don't know if I will play it, but I know that I won't play Seattle. And I want to get a little gauge, and I do listen to a lot of New York talk radio, and they blast the Jets and the ownership and all that sort of stuff with good reason. I want to just take a look a little bit more. Now, one thing also that Seattle has done in a negative way more than the Jets, they've turned the ball over 17 times this year. The Jets only 11. Neither team has been great at forcing turnovers. Seattle a few more, 11 versus 8. So, there has been a little greater propensity for Seattle to, lose about half a turnover more per game than the Jets. I don't know that I would factor that necessarily into my handicap, but I want to gauge a little bit better from the people who are close to the Jets as far as, if their mindset is still, hey, we've got football to play and we know we're not going anywhere. It's unlikely, it's almost impossible. But keep in mind when you talk about tanking, and I always say it every week, it's not the players who tank, it's the coaches who put them in a better position to not win. than what they normally would do if the game meant something. Because remember, these players have contract incentives. If we achieve certain rushing goals, touchdown goals, whatever, and you're talking about money that they're not going to get because not making the playoffs. So the players, I think, for the most, plus if you're not playing hard, you're more susceptible to getting injured. So I think the players play very hard. So in that respect, I would like to get a little bit of comfort that the Jets are going to approach this as a game that they want to go out and win. I don't know that the Jets are all concerned about the number one draft choice, because the quarterback class this year is not going to be all that strong. Certainly not compared to last year.
Yeah, and Aaron Rodgers is even talking about coming back to the team. So are they even going to draft a quarterback?
Well, it's a question also of do the Jets want him back? Because there's been talk some now that with Woody Johnson, the owner, possibly getting another ambassadorship and being away, and have his brother Christopher run the team in his absence, who apparently is very tight with Aaron Rodgers. So there may be a little bit of difference there depending upon who's running the team. And maybe part of the condition is, and there might be like a contract incentive for Aaron Rodgers to mentor whoever the drafted quarterback might be, and it might not necessarily be a first-round quarterback. But I want to get a little feel on how the Jets' mindset is entering this game, because I would like to play the Jets, not as a fan, but because of, you mentioned, the Seattle injuries and some of the drawbacks that they've had.
Yeah, Sue saying Jets tackle like girls. The Jets have the most missed tackles per game this year. Yeah. Only the Colts have more missed tackles than the Jets this year, but the Colts haven't had their bye yet. So the Jets will have the most by week 15.
Yeah, and by the way, that's another thing that the Jets totally blew. You take your defensive coordinator and you make him the interim head coach, and the defense has gotten worse over the last few. Not as significantly as I thought it was initially, but it's still down from where it was, and that's because you're now splitting your time between coaching the defense and running the team.
Yeah,
it's a bad decision.
It's bizarre. Well, first of all, that they would even make that decision, but second, it's so strange that they would get that much worse. I expected a drop off, but for them to be the worst tackling team in the league, that's crazy. So yeah, something's wrong there. I think the effort's off at this point, but maybe they bounce back off the bye. Maybe they did some soul searching. Who knows? Or maybe they're just gonna disappoint everyone again. And
the players were soul searching. The coaching staff was house searching.
Exactly. All right, let's get to the late afternoon games. Buccaneers at the Panthers. This line is Buccaneers -6. Strangely enough, the same line that we saw last week. Buccaneers at the Giants. Not Daniel Jones Giants, but the Tommy DeVito Giants. And so I think this number just seems a little off, because we know the Panthers are better than the Giants. The Panthers beat the Giants with Daniel Jones, and now the Giants have DeVito / Drew Lock, and the Panthers have been better. They took the Chiefs down to the wire to beat the Saints before the Giants. This team has been getting a lot better. And the Buccaneers have some injuries. Jordan Whitehead and Tyke Smith, two starters in the secondary, were both DNP twice. Tristan Wirfs, though, might be back. He was limited twice this week, which is generally, like, you wouldn't think that's a big deal, because the Panthers really don't rush the passer very well. But ever since they got DJ Wanham back in the Giants game, they have put more pressure on the quarterback. So the Panthers are, they're better offensively. Bryce Young improving a little bit. They're better defensively with DJ Wanham returning. And also Josie Jewell returned a few weeks ago after he missed several games. So I think the Panthers are a little underrated here. In the two games last year, in the same two teams, the Buccaneers beat the Panthers 21-18. As I think there were 9-point favorites in that game or something. So the Panthers covered the spread. And then in the final week of the season, the Buccaneers covered and they won 9-0. I think there were 6-point favorites or something. But the Panthers had 2 touchdowns called back by penalty in that game. So I think I lean toward Carolina.
Oh, by the way, the question that I would have there, did the penalties, whatever they were, affect the ability to score the touchdown? It's one thing if they scored the touchdown and the penalty was on an illegal motion or something, as opposed to, well, maybe it gave the quarterback just a half second more than he needed to get rid of the ball.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't have the answer to that, but I do remember being frustrated by that result. Yeah. But that's a good point. So anyway, I am always wary to back bad quarterbacks against Todd Bowles' defense, like the way Todd Bowles. I just mentioned this last week. Todd Bowles eats bad quarterbacks alive. They did that with DeVito last week. Now, the question is, do you still think Bryce Young's a bad quarterback? Because he was awful to start the year, but he has gradually improved under Dave Canales, and so maybe he's not bad anymore. Maybe he's just mediocre or subpar. And if that's the case, then I think the Panthers have a shot to not even cover, but to win this game outright. But if what we saw from Bryce Young is a mirage, then I think Tampa will win this one easily. So I'm a little torn. I'm leaning Carolina. But I could be swayed to go the other side. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can sway you on that one. Initially I did lean towards Tampa Bay, but I am considering, I mentioned, I think when we're referencing one of the other games, that Carolina does have some decent talent on that team. A decent running game that can certainly take some of the pressure off Bryce Young. And yes, Bryce Young has shown some improvement, and maybe Canales had a lot to do with it. The offensive coordinator and those other position coaches, etc., probably had a little bit to do with it. But Tampa Bay was very impressive last week against the Giants. But keep in mind, the Giants' body language looked like they were just showing up for the paycheck, because they did not have a lot of energy in that game at all. They looked like they were missing assignments and didn't really get all that upset about it. And Tampa Bay won convincingly, and they showed that, and remember, Tampa Bay's been a playoff team, the last few years, even since Tom Brady's left. So, it wasn't all that one magical year that they had with him as far as that Super Bowl. But my concern last week in the game against the Giants, there was no consideration, as I recall, of my playing the Giants. It was just, did I want to lay 6 points with Tampa Bay on the road? And I don't know that I really got the answer that yes, I could, even though they won 30-7, because the team was the Giants. And as I said, they looked like they really didn't come to play. I think Carolina's still playing hard. And I think that is shown by the win at New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, and then what they did against Kansas City last week when they're down 27 to I think it was 27-16 or 27-19, I think. And they scored, got the 2-point conversion, and then, Mahomes still had more than 30 seconds left in the game to get him team to kick the winning field goals. But, if you're quote unquote tanking, you don't make that kind of effort in the second part of the game, especially against the defending champion Chiefs. In fact, if anything, and I think I made the same argument when I backed forget who it was, Denver against Atlanta. Denver had just come off that, the blocked field goal loss at Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And rather than being deflated, my thought there was that, they had just been blown out by the Ravens 2 weeks ago. And last week, they should have beaten Kansas City. So I said that was an energizing moment, even though it was a disappointing loss. They proved the critics wrong, who said, well, you've been winning these games, and last week you played a great team and you lost to them badly. And they, really came back and made a case. So I think that this Carolina team is sort of in a similar situation where last week, they weren't in the same position really well, because Mahomes still had the ball at the end when they tied it up. But they can take heart in the fact that against a very good defensive team such as Kansas City, they managed to not just score a touchdown, they got the 2-point conversion that forced a tie. So I think that's as positive. So the more I look at this game, I'm trying to talk myself, much like with the the Patriots against Indianapolis, I think it was the one, or Jacksonville, or Houston against Jacksonville. I'm trying to talk myself into liking Carolina in this spot, and if the line happens to go up to 7, which it might, I'll almost certainly be on Carolina.
Yeah, I've talked about this. The teams that were the worst teams in the NFL to start the year in the first half of the season, your Carolinas, New England's, they're not the worst teams in the NFL anymore. It's like the Giants, the Jacksonville Jaguars.
The Jets, the Cowboys to a certain extent, although that might be changing.
Yeah, teams that had a chance, veteran teams that had a chance, and the things have fallen apart for them, because of injuries or just incompetence. And then now they have a quit factor from some of the players. The Panthers and the Patriots. So we talked about how the Patriots are better. Panthers, they have been improving as well. So you can't view them as one of the worst teams in the NFL anymore. They're still a bad team, but they're not one of the worst. So I think any thought to like how they were playing at the start of the year, you kind of have to erase. and
Yeah.
just
Well, also, I think I made the point last week. It was one of the reasons why I really couldn't take the points against Kansas City was because in their what was it 8 or 9 losses up to that point, or 7 or 8 losses, their average loss has been by 23 points. Okay, but Kansas City, they had trouble. They have trouble scoring that many points. So that's why I couldn't take the Panthers, because they've had too many blowout losses. And at the same time, I couldn't play Kansas City because they don't have enough blowout wins. In fact, I don't know that I have any blowout wins. Maybe one. Well, I think they got it 2 weeks earlier, the win against was it Tennessee? I think was that the 20? Was that the 24-6 win that they had? Something along those lines.
I mean, they beat the Saints by 13. I don't think.
Talking about Kansas City, right?
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, they beat Baltimore by 7. They beat Cincinnati by 1. They beat Atlanta by 5. Beat the Chargers by 7. They beat the Saints by 13. They beat the Niners by 10. They beat the Raiders by 7. They beat the Buccaneers by 6. They beat the Broncos by 2, and then they beat the Panthers by 3.
yeah. So maybe it was the Saints game that I was thinking of. It was their double-digit win.
And
that's why I couldn't play them last week. That's why I can't play them tomorrow.
If Derek Carr didn't get injured at the end of that game, I guarantee the Saints score at the end to make it 6 instead of 13.
Could be.
We saw Rattler instead, and we know what Rattler looked like after that. So, all right, let's get to Rams. Speaking of the Saints, Rams and Saints. This line was 3. It's down to 2.5. Not sure why. We're looking at the injuries. So, Alaric Jackson, their left tackle, the Rams left tackle, is DNP twice, but Rob Havenstein, the right tackle, has been out. He's practiced fully, so they kind of trade your left tackle for right tackle. I don't think that's a huge deal, especially given that the Saints don't rush the passer that well. The Saints have cluster injuries in the interior offensive line right now. Eric McCoy and Lucas Patrick both DNP twice. So if they're both out, it's a pretty bad thing for the Saints. I like the Rams here to bounce back. Now they got trashed on Sunday night against the Eagles, and it is the Eagles. The Eagles are just a juggernaut right now. The Rams, ever since they got their 2 receivers back, have been a lot better. And I really don't like the Saints team at all. I know they had that big win against Cleveland, but this is a team that they lost to the Panthers. Especially with their offensive line injuries against the Rams defense that has been better. The Rams struggled to defend the middle of the field, but they rushed the passer extremely well. They have some good defensive back talent. And I think that they can really collapse the pocket if the Saints are down their 2 offensive linemen. I also like Sean McVay off a loss. So I'm going to be on the Rams here at this number that is down from 3 to 2.5. That's very appealing to me. So who do you like this game? Oh, you're muted, Andy.
No, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I was doing that so that you wouldn't hear all the sounds that are coming out of when the emails come in, the little dings and everything. But this is a good spot that I would normally be on the Saints as hopefully 3-point underdogs to pull the mild upset. I like the fact that they can run the ball. The Rams cannot. They have the Rams are averaging under 100 yards per game. New Orleans is number 9th in 131 yards. They're slightly better at defending the run. Are the Saints? The Rams do have the better passing game, but it's the concern is the imbalance on the Rams. The ability to pass, but not the ability to run. So that's a concern that I have. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, the Saints, I guess they think they're still in a divisional race because Atlanta keeps coming back to the pack, and Tampa Bay does as well. But I'm probably going to end up passing this game simply because I do like the Rams, and I like the remember the way they played last season, winning 7 out of 8 to get the wild card, and they have that capability again this year. What I might look, and I'm a little bit concerned because of those injuries along the offensive line, but I might look over the total, especially because the Rams have the ability they don't have the ability to run, but they do have the ability to pass. And with 2 great receivers that they have, teams can't cheat all that much against the running game.
Yeah, their running game has been worse recently. I do still like Kyron Williams. I wonder if they haven't been able to run because their offensive linemen have returned from injuries and they haven't really figured out. They haven't had that chemistry for a while. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe they do get it together. This is a step up in class for the new interim coach for the Saints. So when he took over, they played the Falcons, who they beat the Falcons, but the Falcons outgained them by 100 yards. There's Young Wei Koo missing some field goals, and then they played the Browns, who is actually a 14-14 game in the fourth quarter, but the Browns just showed no effort to tackle Taysom Hill. The Rams are much better than those two teams, and so I think that, especially with McVay coming off an embarrassing loss, I like betting good teams coming off embarrassing loss, and I view the Rams as a good team, not a great team, but a pretty solid team that I think will go to the playoffs and or maybe go to the playoffs and probably lose in the first round.
I'm not sure I'd use the word embarrassing loss because they lost to the second best team in the NFC.
Right. I mean,
but it was a one-sided loss, and they didn't play as well as they could have. But then again, as far as the coaches are concerned, we don't care if it was a 1-point loss or a 10-point loss or a 20-point loss. It was a loss, and we can't afford those.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the situation I think that the Rams are. And again, another factor along those lines, the tight race in the NFC West.
Yeah, well, I mean, anyone can win it at this point.
Yeah.
Cassandra, my only futures play of the season was a couple weeks ago on the Bengals, 150-1 to win the Super Bowl. What are your thoughts on fading them, siding with them, ATS versus that bet going forward? I guess it's a hedge, right? So I don't know. I mean, they do have a favorable schedule. Like you can hedge that a little bit here. So if they lose to Pittsburgh,
I was going to say that if you wanted to do a hedge and bet Pittsburgh money line in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That might not be a bad way to go because if the Bengals win the Super Bowl, those odds will drop from 150. I would think they would drop to maybe 100-1, given the makeup of the rest of the schedule and then the scenario I put out before that. If they win this game, they're going to be favored most likely. Well, you talked about Dallas. They'll be favored to win their next 3 games, and all of a sudden you go from 4-7 to 8-7. With the games against Denver, which would have wild card implications, and they play them at home, and then Pittsburgh, who might be resting starters because they'll be playing in the wild card round after hosting the Bengals in Week 18. So I'll be curious to see. In fact, aside from that, I like the Bengals. I want to see them win because I'd like to see what the odds are on the Bengals right now and how far they would drop after a win this week. Because really, I think that schedule is very doable. I remember having a few weeks ago, and I hadn't really considered as much, but I was thinking of when these teams were like 2-7 or whatever. I felt that Miami had the best path to the playoffs, but that was before Tua came back, and it was provisioned on Tua getting back. But now that I look at it, I think it's clearly Cincinnati. I would say Cincinnati and Miami. Well, Miami probably has a better defense, but overall, I don't know that the rosters are that dissimilar. Different styles of quarterbacks, of course. But nonetheless, I think that because of Cincinnati's schedule, how it plays out, especially those week games, that late game hosting Denver, and then Pittsburgh possibly or more likely if they choose to do so, because the game will mean nothing to them if they've wrapped up the number 2 or number 3 seed. Okay, that they would be facing the second stringers on Pittsburgh. This team has the real possibility of doing what the Rams almost did last year when they won 7 of 8 to go haplessly out of the playoffs into the wild card. They would probably need to win 7 out of 8, but I don't think that scenario matters if they lose this week.
Yeah. I like what you said, betting the Steelers money line.
Yeah.
You could also bet the Steelers +3 and try to middle it. If the Bengals win by 1. You win the +3, and you get to keep this bet alive. So you don't get the same odds, but
if you could do that, but the hedge is really. I don't know that you're necessarily trying to protect the profit so much as you are. If you play the money line, the only way you can win the money line bet. Okay, which you don't want to win. You make the bet because you don't want to win the money line bet because you want the Bengals to still be alive. Okay, yeah, I suppose you could hedge if you wanted to try and get and hope for a low scoring game. But if you play the money line, at least you can, let's say, earn back the value of whatever you put on the ticket, because their chances Right now, if they're a long shot, I think those chances drop significantly because of the schedule coming up. If they happen to beat the Steelers, whether it be by 1 or 2 points or not, so that's the way that I would analyze it. Is that I'm not looking to protect winnings. I'm looking to recover. In other words, I'm not looking to protect winnings, which is normally what I would do if I took the points. Okay. Like in a teaser, for example, to protect an open teaser, I'm getting 7 points better than what I need the other side to do in the teaser. Here, I'm looking to recover the cost of a ticket that will almost certainly be worthless if Pittsburgh does not win this game.
Yeah,
and I mean it would be the Bengals futures ticket that would be the worthless one.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a good point.
Or next to worthless.
Yeah. It would be pretty bad
because then they would have to win their final 5 games with no margin of error, just
right.
to end up with 8 losses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or to avoid ending up with 9 losses is what I'm saying. Yeah. They'd have to win out.
Yeah, and it's not even guaranteed at that point. So yeah, it'll be tough. So all right, let's get to the main attraction for Week 13.
By the way, the time to start hedging might very well be if they do get down that 4-game winning streak and are 8-7,
mm-hmm.
And then it'd be interesting to see what the odds are for them to miss or make the playoffs at that point, because it depends largely, at least right now, the way the things. It depends largely on how Miami, to a certain extent, but certainly how Denver goes, because they could control their fate against Denver most likely because they host them, and if they'd win, they'd have a tiebreaker edge.
Exactly. Yeah, it's true. All right, this is the main attraction for Week 13. We have the Eagles at the Ravens. Some positive news for the Eagles. Devontae Smith returned to a limited practice today after being DNP on Wednesday. So there might be a chance he's returning, which, would be pretty huge for the Eagles in this matchup, because Baltimore, as we've discussed every week, has a defense that is great against the run, but awful against the pass. I was kind of confused about the Chargers game plan there. They kept trying to run Gus Edwards, despite going against this defense. I don't know. I think the Eagles will be able to take advantage of that. And
I thought the Chargers were using the run basically to say, hey, we know we're not going to have much success, but we at least want you to have us think about running the football, so you can't just totally cheat on protecting against the pass.
Yeah, and in fairness, Quentin Johnson.
And you know what I mean by cheat, not cheating in a cheating way, but, sort of anticipate that we're going to pass with almost a degree of 100% certainty. We don't want you to think that.
Yeah. So, I mean, in fairness, Quentin Johnson dropped 1 million passes. So, anyway, this is a game I'm just going to watch and have fun. I don't really see a great betting opportunity here. I would lean the Eagles. They're getting the points. And I think that the Eagles are the better team. They're just the more well-rounded team. Whereas, like I said, Baltimore struggles against the pass. I worry about Baltimore's pass protection as well. Whereas the Eagles don't really seem to have any flaws, or at least we don't know of any flaws that have been exposed yet. Their defense is ranked number 1 in EPA since their bye. They've just been fantastic on the Fangio. Their cornerbacks have played very well. And I think, if you look at Lamar Jackson's record against the NFC, which is, I think a byproduct of these teams not being familiar with him, the Eagles know how to combat these scrambling quarterbacks, because they have one. And we just saw them restrict Jaden Daniels very well. And I know Lamar Jackson's a different animal, but still, I think that they could at least limit Lamar Jackson running and stop the pass. And they're great against the run. I think they can restrict Derrick Henry. And so I think the Eagles have a chance to win this game. But, these are 2 great teams. Obviously, the Ravens can win as well. So, like I said, I'm probably not going to bet this one. So maybe Eagles teasing up to 9. But what do you think about this game?
Yeah, well, there's an old axiom that, I'll clean it up a little bit. When garbage plays garbage, take garbage plus the points. Okay? And the corollary to that is when 2 really good teams play each other, take the points with one of the 2 really good teams, because if they're really good teams, and especially in this kind of price range, either team can win the game. Okay? Yeah. Let's just give some numbers here. Total offense, Philadelphia number 3, Baltimore number 1. Total defense, Philadelphia number 1 as far as yards go, Baltimore number 24. But here's where it gets interesting when you break it down between rushing and passing. These are the number 1 and 2 rushing teams in the league. Philadelphia, 193 yards per game. Baltimore, 180 yards per game. They're both very good against the run. We mentioned Baltimore now is number 2. I think Minnesota's now number 1, but it's not by a lot. 78 yards per game. Philadelphia, number 7, and that's how good this Baltimore number 2 defense is. 21 yards worse. 99. That's still very good, but it ranks number 7. Now let's take a look at the passing numbers. Passing defense, passing offense, rather. Philadelphia is number 25, and Baltimore is number 3. But when you look at pass defense, and this is a surprise, and it's along the lines of Philadelphia's improvement, Philadelphia is number 3 for the entire season, allowing 175 yards per game. Baltimore's allowing 100 yards more, 278, number 31. So much more better balanced defense, significantly balanced because you're ranking number 2 and number 7 and number 3. It's not like Baltimore where their offense overall, just to use a comparison, they're number 2 against the run and number 31 against the pass. So there are some vulnerabilities can be exploited there. Now I mentioned before I take a look at the change from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. Total offense. Again, this is basically, I think they've all had buys, if I remember. Did Baltimore have their buy? Maybe they didn't have their buy yet.
Haven't.
Okay.
No, they haven't.
So they've played 11. Philadelphia played 12 games. So I'll just use I use 1 through 6, 7 versus 12, or 1 through 6, 7 versus 11. Okay, depending upon the team. So it's a little bit skewed, but not much with a 5 or 6 game sample. Over the second 6 games that they've played, Philadelphia has increased their net yardage by 58 yards per game and also decreased their yardage allowed by 65 yards per game. So that's a huge improvement in the defense and a very nice improvement in the offense. Baltimore, their offense down 53 yards per game from half number 1 to half number 2. When I say half, I'm talking about games, not halftime of games, and down 42 yards defensively. So while we're seeing Philadelphia, and the numbers are bearing it out, that their play has improved both overall on offense and on defense, first half of the season versus second half, Baltimore's have gone noticeably the other way. So I'm now making more of a case to myself as I'm talking out loud here of not just playing Baltimore plus the points, Philadelphia plus the points, playing them to win the game.
Yeah, money line makes sense. Like I said, I like the teasing them up.
I do like the tease also, yes.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if this is a blowout. So, it looks like we're on the same side there, though. We're not too.
By the way, and part of it is Philadelphia has improved their turnover margin. Their turnover differential first half versus second half has improved by plus 15. Yeah. Baltimore's has improved by plus 2. So whereas they were turning the ball over a lot in the first part of the season, this number suggests, and I think the underlying stats show it out, they've been benefiting from a positive turnover margin over the last 4 or 5 games. Yeah,
right. And not a surprise that the Eagles have improved with the 2 new coordinators. There was an adjustment period. They struggled in the first 4 games. And also in the first 4 games, they had A.J. Brown out for 3 of those games. They had Lane Johnson out for 2 of those games. Devontae Smith missed the Tampa Bay game in the second half of the Saints game. So
you brought it up that having Smith back there going up against this vulnerable Baltimore defense has to make the offense look. I mean, Saquon Barkley could run for 500 yards. Who knows?
Yeah. No.
Not against Baltimore, but I'll be interested to see what his proposition is against this Baltimore defense, knowing how great he's been this year, and knowing now that the Ravens have to be confronted with 2 really good wide receivers and a running quarterback who can also throw the ball.
Yeah. Do you want to take a stab on the rushing over on their prop for Saquon Barkley this week?
My initial thought was 75.
It is not on FanDuel. It is 91.5.
Yeah. That. Well, you know what I would do if I'm going to research that. The difference between a team that allows 4 yards per. You could do it offense or defense. A team that allows 4 yards per rush versus a team that allows 5 yards per rush. Mm-hmm. Is that the team that allows 5 yards per rush allows a lot of big play runs that boost the average number, because there are a lot of going to be runs that are going to be small numbers, but you get a couple of 25, 30-yard runs in there. I'd be interested to see how many runs of, say, more than 15 yards the Ravens have allowed this season. That would help me with the Barkley prop.
Yeah, I would too. Barkley just breaks so many of those long ones. So yeah, I mean, if they have
but that's it. I wouldn't think that they would have allowed many, but if all of a sudden we find out that, let's say that the average team, let's say 8% of their runs are 15 yards or more that they allow.
Yeah.
Well, if we find out that Baltimore's 2%, I'd feel much more comfortable, not necessarily betting the under on Barkley, but not betting the over.
Right. Exactly.
And actually, since they're allowing 75 yards per game overall, and now you're asking one running back to increase that number by 20% or so, I still might look under that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Makes sense. I don't know if we're going to touch that prop, but yeah, I mean that research is.
And actually, my approach to Philadelphia's game plan is open the game up by throwing the ball.
Right.
Loosen up that defense.
Absolutely.
And then in maybe a passing situation, you hand the ball to Barkley.
Yeah, establish the pass to run the ball. Yeah,
exactly
right. Okay,
especially because you've got a defense that is so unbalanced, run versus pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. All right, let's get to the Sunday night game. We have 49ers at the Bills. I bet this one already. I locked it in at Bills -7, -104. Look at the Niners injury report. You have Nick Bosa DNP twice. You have Trent Williams DNP twice, and there was a report saying that Trent Williams is using a knee scooter to get around the locker room because it hurts too much for him to walk.
I wonder if his teammates are calling him Grandpa.
No. Aaron Banks, good guard for the Niners, DNP twice. Diamajor Lenore, one of the top cornerbacks, DNP twice. And then there was a report as well this week. Fred Warner, it came out that he's playing on a fractured ankle.
He's had lingering injury issues, I think, all season.
Yeah,
Warner.
This Niner team is so banged up. I didn't even mention the players who are already out. Brandon Ayuk, for example, Dre Greenlaw, though he opened up his practice window. Javon Hargrave, Travarius Ward's missed action. I think Deebo Samuel is playing on an injury as well. This team is so injured, and then you have Brock Purdy, who's not even guaranteed to play here.
What was his status in practice?
He's limited twice this week, and I say limited, and I was like, okay, what does that mean? So I dug into it. He was limited on Wednesday. He threw one pass in practice. that's limited, apparently.
So they must have run. They must have they must have a limit on the number of characters you can do in the report, because the phrase should be extremely limited.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So
which, by the way, I'm not joking here, because extremely limited versus limited makes a huge difference in the likelihood that a player is going to play, or at least give the impression that it's much less likely than just saying limited.
Yeah, and I wouldn't trust the Niners to be forthright anyway, because they told us ahead of week 1 that McCaffrey had a calf injury, and then he was questionable for the Jets game. And lo and behold, he missed half the season with an Achilles injury. This team, you can't trust them at all. But I think they're done here. I think they have just way too many injuries to overcome. This reminds me, what this team reminds me of is the 2003 Buccaneers, whereas the 2002 Buccaneers won the Super Bowl. But the next year, they had a lot of injuries. They were getting old. They're getting slow, and they couldn't sustain success. Like, they'd win and they'd lose. They'd win and they'd lose. And the Snyder team is basically the same way. And I feel like the bottom is like opened up here.
Well, and again, I'll go back to the theory of playing all those extra postseason games over the last 5 or 6 years. I think there was one year a couple of years ago they didn't make the playoffs, but that takes a toll. And you combine that with a year older. It's a lot easier to get injured. You're a little slower. It may not be noticeable, but if you look at how quick somebody was in 2023, compare that to how quick he was in 2021, it's a noticeable difference.
Yeah, you look at their past 5 games, for example. Niners Cowboys, they almost blew a lead in the second half. They lost by 10 to the Chiefs. They almost lose to Tampa Bay, where the Tampa Bay didn't have Mike Evans or Chris Godwin in that game. And then they blew a lead to Seattle and lost, and then they lose to Green Bay by 28. This team is just not playing well at all. And I think that this line is just based on price memory, where people see +7. I think they might be gravitating toward that because they see San Francisco defending NFC champions +7. The Bills are good, but I think the Niners can keep it close. They didn't keep it close last week against Green Bay, and now they're going to be potentially in worse shape So I like Buffalo here. I think they win going away. What do you think about this one?
Well, I was leaning towards San Francisco just based upon character of a team, to rally around, all the missing pieces. Now, last week, if you recall, and we were in those Westgate and the Circa contests, and the line was Packers 2. And I think the Circa Millions had a record number, nearly 3,000. I think it was 2,700 and something, 2,780 or something, out of 5,700, who are on the Packers -2. Okay.
Still low, though. Still very low.
Well, no, it was at the time, and the game went off at 5.5, and I was contemplating, do I really, I liked them in the contest, it was a different two. I ended up making a play laying the 5.5 with the Packers. I just said, you know what? There's just too much missing there. I don't care how hard they play; they just don't have the ability to sustain 4 quarters of football with the roster that they're taking out on Lambeau Field, and we saw it. And I'm thinking now the same way with all those injuries that this could be just as one-sided as the game last week against Green Bay.
Yeah, I think so too.
So I'm no longer my, I don't care. You could play 12 on 11, and that might not help San Francisco. Seriously.
I know and you mentioned the numbers in the Circa. I was looking at the Super Contest. It's like 55.6% of the entries took Green Bay. And I was thinking like that is way low. Like you're getting such a great line value with all these entries. Like I would have thought it would be like 80%, but
well, I'll tell you one reason to keep it, because I was actually talking about that with someone earlier today about these contests and trying to interpret, what someone is doing, especially in the Circuit contest, but to a lesser extent in the Westgate, because the Circuit contest does have what they call the booby prize. You pick the most losers, and I think you win like $150,000. So some people might have been picking the 49 or not picking on the Packers, hoping that they might be upset, or even though it's unlikely, and if you're trailing, you need to pick games that are going to be on the unpopular side. In fact, in that Circa contest where there are 5,700 entries, not only did let me see if I get the numbers out here. Not only did 2,700 and some odd play on the Packers, which I actually thought was about right. I thought it'd be a little bit more about a little bit more of the field, or a little bit under half the field, and it was. But not only was it, let me see, 2,797. Let's say 2,700 played. You had 798. So let's say 800 people actually take the 2 with the 49ers, and that's because they want to make up ground. That if the Packers happen to lose or not cover for whatever reason, they are going to make up ground on half the field, or 2,800 people, and they're basically saying, I really don't have much of a chance of winning, so I need to do something that's radically different. I've got to find out who the unpopular sides are and bet the unpopular side. So when you see the numbers that look a little strange, there's sort of game theory in there, and especially with the Circuit contest where there are even quarterly prizes for picking the most losers. And as I remember them saying, because I follow it, that the person trying to get the prize for most losers actually has a better record than the person trying to pick the he might be like 13-45, and the leader in the contest might be 13-45 is 50. They might be 43-15.
I saw that, and I was laughing so hard. I wonder if he's trying to lose or if he's just that bad.
No, he's probably trying to lose. Now he may have week 1 he may have said, I want to go for winners this year, and he goes 0-5. So all of a sudden your perspective changes. But I also think, some people say, well, why don't a lot of people, if they're going for most losers, just play the opposite of the teams that they're playing to win? It's a different process to handicap when you're trying to pick the point spread loser of a game than when you're trying to pick a point spread winner of the game, because different factors come into play as far as, you're trying to say how much better is a team versus how much worse is a team.
Yeah.
And you may come up with different matchups, may end up having you on different teams that you feel have, and again, home road is also a lot part of it as well. That the handicapping process sometimes says that, well, this team is really good at home and bad on the road. This other team is, look at Dallas, better on the road. This is their first home win than they were at home. So they might have been in a matchup against a team that was outstanding on the road and not at home. So it would vary there. So it is an interesting game theory situation when you're analyzing when you're trying to analyze why people make certain selections that are more than head scratchers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so first place in the circa Balls Ross. He is 42-16-2. And in last place in the circa two meatballs, his record is
Yeah.
16-44. So if he had done the opposite, he'd be 44-16. He'd be in first place. So
Yeah.
I had a good laugh about that. Because I'm saying, Walt, did you see my post to you about Coward talking about why he liked the Chargers the other night? No, I didn't see that. Let me know. I'm kind of interested in hearing that. I wonder if he always says like when Coward talks, like he's like they're
Is he talking about He's talking about the Monday night game. You like the Chargers against the Ravens?
Ravens Chargers. Because whenever Coward analyzes a team and he picks the home team, he's like, I like them. They're at home. It's like, yeah, we know they're at home. Like, like we can see at whatever. It's like tell us otherwise. Okay,
I think he does a good job because he's trying to stir up controversy. You know, that to get people talking. Oh, what a dummy he is! Yeah, he's the one who's kept collecting all the money. How dumb is he? But he knows people will talk. You know, people love to criticize, and sort of that sort of stuff. You know, fosters criticism.
Yeah, it does. So yeah, the quote is Baltimore does not have like a Pittsburgh / Green Bay / San Francisco crowd, so it'll be. But I'm right. He said mostly Chargers fan base at home. I was right about that. The famous Chargers home field advantage brought to you by Colin Coward. Yeah, that's he always says it's not even the controversial thing. Like he's always like, I like this team. They're at home. Like he always says that.
Yeah,
it's not like he's trolling. He just says it as if it's like a good thing. And as we know, like home field has diminished. So I don't.
Yeah, overall,
right. So
that's why I'll be interested to see. In fact, if I mention when we were talking about the game, I'll be interested to see how many Eagle fans are able to finagle their way into Baltimore because they're so close to each other. You know, it's a 2-hour drive and a 30-minute metro ride or something like that on the Amtrak.
Yeah.
And although I do think, I don't know how they sell their tickets because when this game was announced, I'm sure a lot of Eagle fans tried to get tickets, and I don't know if the Ravens sell out season tickets or not.
The Ravens fans generally show up, so
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, they don't travel well, but they definitely pack their own stadium. So yeah. Okay, let's get to the Monday night game. We have Browns at the Broncos. Don't really have an injury report for this game because we had 1 day's worth, and I didn't really see anything significant. So outside of Cedric Tillman, concussion, DNP, but I suspected that he would be out anyway. So the Browns may only have one viable outside receiver in Jerry Jeudy, and I assume that the Broncos are going to do everything in their power to take him out of the game so he doesn't embarrass them.
Oh, by the way, I was going to say, and by the way, they know Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, exactly right. So they know his tendencies and stuff like that. I like the Broncos a lot here. The Browns are another. I mentioned this earlier with Tennessee, a bad team coming off a win, sustaining success. I think is usually a bad thing for these bad teams, and I don't really see them coming off that snow globe game, coming into Denver and. Jameis Winston against a great defense just smells like trouble. I know that he had a good performance against the Steelers, but as I mentioned, the Steelers were down Highsmith and they weren't rushing the passer as well as they normally do. The Browns are down their top.
The Steelers are not necessarily a dominant defense, but are a fundamentally sound defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, especially with Highsmith out, they're not dominant. So the Browns are going to be without their 2 left tackles. And then you have Jameis in a down environment, coming off the win. I fear that we're
down environment, up in altitude.
Right. And I think that we're going to see something similar to what we saw against the Chargers when they're coming off that win against Baltimore. He threw 3 interceptions in that game, and there were multiple drops as well. He could have thrown 5 or 6 picks in that game. I think this is going to be very ugly here, and I like Denver to cover this game a lot. This is one of my top plays of the week. And I will bring up your site before I ask you who you like here, because I know through your mail letter that you have this game pretty high as well. And so I urge everyone to go to thelogicalapproach.com and sign up for your newsletter and to see these, all your picks. But who do you want to tell us who you like this last game?
I also like Denver a lot, and part of it is the fact that with Bo Nix making the development, Denver now has a pretty respectable offense to go along what's already been a very solid defense. The game is at altitude, and you mentioned, I'll bring it up for about the 8th time tonight, Cleveland coming off that win against Pittsburgh, and they get Pittsburgh again next week, but not that they have any chances. Denver very much, Yeah, I guess they're not really in the contention for that is for the division, title with both the Chargers and the Chiefs ahead of them. But they certainly have a very realistic shot at the at a wild card. They do a lot of things very well on defense, and the offense, as I say, has improved. In fact, I'm taking a look. Their total offense, first half versus second half, and they have played 12 games, up 71 yards per game. Actually, Cleveland's is up a little bit more, but they were really low to begin with, and their defenses, both defenses are down a little bit, but not to the same extent that the offenses have improved. And the offensive improvement for Cleveland is due mostly how bad Watson was as quarterback. Mm-hmm. They had to improve, okay? Right. With Denver, the improvement is the development of Bo Nix as a quarterback and how that translates to better offensive improvement across the board for this team. I like the Broncos in this spot. I liked them a couple of weeks ago against Atlanta, and you can maybe see some similarities. I mean, Cleveland has a talented roster, but the injuries. Chubb is not. He's not anything like he was before the injury, and he's I don't know if he's fully healed or not, but he's obviously been cleared to play. But he's no longer the threat, or at least he hasn't been the threat. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is something there if they don't just shut him down at some point. Although he'll probably fight it, and I can understand that that's a mentality of the athlete that you always think you're good to go, and sometimes you are, but many times I won't say more often than not, but I'll say many times you're not for your own. Doing it for your own best interest, next year down the road. So no, I like the spot for Denver. I think that they were a team that I did play over their season win total because I did expect. I did like the pick of Bo Nix, unlike a lot of people who were suspect. And again, I trust a lot of it in the. Now I don't know how much Peyton had in the say to bring Russell Wilson over to Denver. Because that obviously didn't work, and maybe Peyton thought that he could work with him, but he certainly knows something about quarterbacks, and he saw something in Bo Nix apparently that others did not see, and thus far he's been proven right. Now it's only 12 games into a season, but you have to be encouraged, and like I said when we talked about the Washington game, Daniels may be fatiguing a little bit, but. And I think someone brought this point up that I think Bo Nix played almost the most number of college games as any quarterback has. With all the with his time at Auburn and then Oregon and fifth year and all that sort of stuff. So he came in, with a lot of game experience, and so maybe the transition wasn't quite as difficult for him as it is for the vast majority of rookies.
Yeah, it's sort of like Mac Jones in that aspect, where Mac Jones,
Mitch Trubisky was another one.
Right. Yeah.
Didn't have a lot of college action.
Yeah. So I worry about Bo Nix as far as upside for the future, but it makes sense that he's more prepared for the NFL now. So we'll see if he can make upgrades to his game, and whereas teams will have film on him, much more film next year. So we'll see how they adjust to it. But yeah, this year he's playing well. He had a great game against Atlanta 2 weeks ago. Not so much last week. He still played solid last week against the Raiders, but. He's played well overall, and this Browns defense is not what it's cracked up to be exactly. They're missing some pieces. Garrett's been bothered by foot injuries. They're not really producing like they did last year. So I like that. Denver's defense. They're a unit that eats alive bad quarterbacks. I talked about it last week when they were playing Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
Against bad quarterbacks, they just thrive. And Jameis Winston's not as bad as Gardner Minshew, but he is very turnover prone. So, we could see a lot of turnovers in this game, I think. So. Yeah,
I'd probably rate him somewhere between 18 and 24.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, would you rate him much lower?
I had to think about it off the top of my head. Yeah. I'd probably 20 to 26, something like that, or something. I don't know. I'd have to think about all the quarterbacks. I think he's probably in the 20s for me. Probably mid 20s, I think.
Okay. Reasonable. We're not that far off. Yeah.
There are some games where he looks like the 10th best quarterback in the NFL. There's some games where he looks like the 50th best quarterback in the NFL. So maybe you just average them together and get 30. I don't know. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, that's about it for this week. So do you want to, before we head out, do you want to talk about the logicalapproach.com?
I can just mention that again. We have we'll be putting something together for the balance of the season that I'll try and update this week for that, as far as getting information and all that. We do have the stats up there. Try and get up there on Tuesday nights now. Of course, we're at the very end of the college football season, so we've got the full slate of games this week. All 134 teams in action. Interesting. So I've got the stats up there that people can take a look at, and of course, we'll be getting the conference championship games next week, and then the bowl matchups and the college football playoff. And of course, the NFL season now 2/3 complete. We're into the final third of the season, so the numbers start to be a little bit more meaningful. But again, you have to contact, because it's the age-old argument: how much weight do you place on full season? How much weight do you put on current performance or recent performance? And how do you define recent performance? Last 3 games, last 5 games, last half of the season? And there's no right or wrong definition of recency. It's what you feel comfortable with. I personally like to look at the last 4 games, because that way you are ensuring at least 1 home game and 1 road game. Very often it'll be 2-2. Sometimes it'll be 3-1. But at least you get to see at least some sort of difference. If you start going back 6 games, that game from that data from 6 games ago, you're now talking over a month and a half. When you're looking to analyze the 7th game in the sequence, might be a little bit stale. So there's no real perfect way to define it, but I do present the full season stats. I keep track myself of the recency stats, but I use the numbers on that spreadsheet as a starting point. Let's put it that way. I do like to look for, like in rushing yard, I like to look for strengths versus weaknesses. Now, a lot of it are, surface, a good rushing team against a bad rushing defense. I like to look for that. Okay. But at least that tells me what to look for. And it eliminates, when I use that kind of information, it eliminates a great number of games, especially in the colleges. Not so much in the pros, because there's only 16 games in a full week anyway. So I do, obviously pay close attention to every game. But even there, I look to find out what fundamental advantages are involved in a team strength going up against the opponent's weakness.
Yeah, definitely a fan of recency stats. I look past a month, so 4 weeks.
It's about 4 or 5 weeks, yeah.
Yeah. So I think something in that range makes sense. So yeah, definitely check out thelogicalapproach.com. Sign up for Andy's newsletter. As well. So much great information in there. Andy, not only does he give his picks, but he has these great stats on either spreads or totals, and just doing a lot of research into it. So it's a great read.
I think this week and next we're doing an analysis on NFL totals.
Yeah, that was the totals were this week. So yeah, definitely sign up for that. Please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store. We'll be back on Saturday with Quacky doing our final thoughts for week 13. But guys, happy Thanksgiving once again. And hopefully you have a great betting Sunday and Black Friday, and nail all your bets and your props and everything like that. So
if you're going to the malls, sharpen your elbows.
It's true. Yeah,
a lot of people go online now, but there's still old-fashioned people who like to go in there and throw clothes on the floor and stuff like that.
Exactly right. So yeah, I try to avoid the crowds. I do my shopping online. I do like going to the mall eventually, but just to see all the stuff. But not on Black Friday. I'll wait for a couple weeks to do that. So all right, guys, have a great night. And I will talk to you on Saturday. And Andy, love doing the show with you once again. Thanks for coming on.
Always a pleasure. Enjoy it. And let's hope we have a fair share of winners this weekend. Like I said the other night, let's hope that we don't bet on turkey, that the turkeys are not the ones we bet on, but the ones that are now being digested.
Absolutely. All right.
And we'll with the leftovers for the next few days as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys, have a great night, and I'll talk to you on Saturday.